Ma'am, I'm asking you for the last time. You need to vacate the premises immediately.
We need eyes on the floor, Section C. Now!
It was a calm morning in Louisiana when Elizabeth Stones, a retired Navy SEAL and decorated combat nurse, pulled into the parking lot of Brave Hearts High School. She stepped out of her car wearing her deep Navy uniform, neatly pressed, bearing the twin emblems of her life's service. The SEAL insignia on one shoulder, a nurse's badge on the other. She wasn't here to be recognized. She wasn't here for honor. She was here for one reason: her son, Pascal, the school's valedictorian and top graduate. After years of missed birthdays, long deployments, and silent phone calls during war, she had promised herself she would not miss this day. Nothing, she had sworn, would keep her from watching him walk that stage. Elizabeth walked through the main doors with the ease of a soldier and the composure of a mother on a mission. Inside, the gymnasium was packed. Blue and gold banners hung overhead, families squeezed together in folding chairs. The noise was steady, laughter, camera clicks, and the clatter of nervous feet. She made her way to the front row, the VIP section reserved for family of honor students. She had the ticket in hand, showed it at the entrance. The volunteer nodded and waved her in. She sat calm, dignified, eyes forward. She had seen war zones quieter than this, but she wasn't bothered by the noise. She was focused on one thing: her son. But not everyone shared her calm around her. Whispers stirred. People eyed her uniform, her posture, the way she sat alone. Some muttered under their breath, "Is she a nurse? What's she doing in the front? Did she sneak in?" Elizabeth heard them, but chose not to react. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, not after 2 decades of serving a country that often forgot her name the moment she took the uniform off.
But it didn't take long for the real confrontation to begin. 2 private security guards began making their way toward her from the side entrance, both white, mid-40s, one with a clipboard, the other wearing mirrored sunglasses indoors. She noticed their formation immediately. Quick glances, quiet words, they had singled her out. The first guard leaned down. "Ma'am," he said in a firm tone, "this section's reserved." Elizabeth didn't look up. "I know," she replied. "I belong here. Can we see your pass?" She calmly handed over the ticket. The guard stared at it, unimpressed. "This doesn't look like the usual family ticket." Elizabeth raised her eyes now. "It's a VIP family pass. I'm Pascal Stone's mother." There was a pause. The second guard stepped forward. "You're saying you're his mother?" His tone was laced with disbelief. And it wasn't just about the name. It was about her skin, her uniform, her presence. "You're not in formal wear. You're not on the list I have." Elizabeth kept her voice steady. "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here for my son." People nearby had gone quiet. The whispers stopped. Now there were just eyes watching, recording, judging. The guard leaned in, voice low. "We're going to need you to move. You can sit in the general audience area." "No," Elizabeth said. "Ma'am, no," she repeated, louder this time. "I'm not moving." There was a stillness now, the kind that comes just before a storm. The guard straightened. The second began speaking into his walkie-talkie. The tension climbed, and then it happened.
10 men stood quietly all across the gym, some from the bleachers, others from the sides. They moved with precision, with purpose. They converged toward the front, toward her. No one understood what was happening until they arrived, until they stood behind Elizabeth Stones like a wall. Veterans, brothers, SEALs, men who owed their lives to her. Sergeant Ortiz, who she had revived with CPR in a field hospital minutes before flatlining. Lieutenant Marsh, whose arteries she clamped under fire while keeping 2 others alive. Private Walker, whose body she covered in flames and treated with her bare hands. They remembered her not just as a nurse, not just as a SEAL, but as the reason they were still breathing.
Now they stood in silence. No introductions, no speeches, no weapons, just their presence. The guards froze. Elizabeth stayed seated, hands folded in her lap. "You still need me to move?" she asked calmly. The first guard stepped back, said nothing. The second lowered his radio. The air had gone quiet, not because something was wrong, but because something was coming. The gym, moments before a hive of chatter, now stood in a hush. Every conversation had trailed off into expectant silence. Camera lenses tilted upward, grandparents straightened their spines, siblings clutched flower bouquets tighter. Everyone had sensed it, the tension, the rhythm, the presence of something that couldn't be ignored.
And then the principal's voice crackled through the PA system. Calm, steady, and laced with formality, it echoed against the walls of Bravehearts High School. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our graduating class's highest honor recipient, valedictorian, National Science Award winner, all-state track champion." A pause, a breath. "Pascal Stones." The words hit the gymnasium like a match to gasoline. The crowd erupted, clapping, cheering, whistles that bounced off the bleachers. The pride of parents, teachers, and students came pouring out like a flood. But none of it, not the volume, not the frenzy, matched the sound that now filled the space. 10 men clapping, slow, deliberate, thunderous. The rhythm wasn't just applause, it was military, disciplined, unified, intentional. Hands struck, palms in perfect sync, one beat, then another and another. It rolled through the gym like a steady march, like boots on gravel, like something primal and deeply rooted in honor. The crowd heard it and followed, their wild cheers settling into the cadence the 10 men set. Students looked around, teachers exchanged glances. Many didn't know who those men were, but they knew instinctively that they mattered, that something profound was happening. And then he appeared, Pascal Stones. From the far end of the stage, between the drawn curtains, he stepped into view. Tall, composed, his black graduation robe moved like silk against his long strides. Gold honor cords draped around his neck. The tassel on his cap swayed slightly with each step. He was the embodiment of excellence, of leadership, of years of silent discipline shaped not just in classrooms, but in the quiet halls of a small house where his mother would return from deployment exhausted and still ask him how his day was. The crowd saw a student. The teachers saw a prodigy. But what Pascal saw when his eyes lifted from the stage and scanned the crowd was entirely different. His gaze slid past the rows of clapping parents, past the principal waiting with a wide smile, past the sea of cell phone lights. He locked eyes with her, Elizabeth Stones, seated in the front row, still upright, composed, her hands folded in her lap. Behind her, the 10 SEALs still stood in silent guard. The moment stretched. Pascal's steps slowed, not out of nerves, but something deeper. He had expected the crowd. He had prepared for the speech. He had braced himself for flashbulbs and accolades. But he hadn't prepared for that. His mother surrounded by warriors, men she had saved, men who had come for her, men who now stood for her. It hit him like a wave. Not the memory of childhood, not the image of scraped knees or science fairs, but the memory of watching her pack her duffel bag with surgical tools, prayer cards, and field manuals, of hearing her say, "I'll be back, be strong." The memory of medals tucked in drawers, of a mother who never bragged, who had never once made herself the center of anything until now. He stopped for the briefest second. Their eyes met across the room. She didn't smile, she didn't wave, and neither did he. They didn't need to, because everything that needed to be said was already there. In the silence, in the locked gaze, in the respect,
in the story they shared that no one else in that gym could ever fully understand. He resumed walking, each step firmer than the last.
The principal extended her hand. Pascal shook it, took his diploma. The crowd cheered again, but he didn't lift his arms in victory. He didn't raise his certificate to the cameras. Instead, he turned to her, to the woman who raised him with no excuses, who trained him to wake up with discipline, who taught him that service wasn't something you put on a resume, it was something you lived through blood, sweat, silence, and sacrifice. Pascal's eyes glistened, and then he bowed. Not to the crowd, not to the stage, but to her. A simple, respectful, low nod, shoulders rolled forward, chin to chest, a son's salute to his mother. It wasn't performance, it was truth. The kind of truth no speech could hold, no trophy could reflect. The kind of truth that comes from knowing where you came from and exactly who brought you there. The cameras flashed, but the most important picture was burned into every heart watching, the boy who had become a man because a woman chose to stand when the world tried to move her. And as Pascal straightened and turned to walk off the stage, the 10 men behind Elizabeth finally sat down, like soldiers at ease, their purpose complete. The audience didn't fully know what had just passed between them, but they felt it. The energy shifted. People blinked away tears they couldn't explain. A few even stood up without knowing why, because in that moment, they hadn't just witnessed a graduation, they had witnessed legacy. The sun had lowered in the Louisiana sky, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement of the school parking lot. The chaotic energy of the graduation ceremony had spilled out through the gymnasium doors and flooded the open space. Laughter floated in every direction. Camera flashes popped like firecrackers. Horns honked, balloons bobbed in the humid breeze. Everyone was celebrating. Siblings chasing each other between cars, parents posing awkwardly beside homemade banners, caps tossed and retossed for one more perfect photo. But not everyone was moving. In the far corner of the parking lot, beneath the outstretched arms of a massive oak tree, its bark thick and old like something that had stood since the Civil War, there was stillness. There, untouched by the noise, stood Elizabeth Stones. She had not moved far from the gymnasium. She stood with her back straight, her expression unreadable. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above her, painting dappled gold across her navy blue uniform and the quiet metal stitched just above her heart. A few yards behind her stood 10 men, the same SEALs who had risen for her earlier, now quiet once more. They stood in a semicircle, neither approaching nor retreating. There was no command given, no formation announced, but they waited respectfully, silently, like sentinels posted at the edge of a moment too sacred to interrupt. Then came Pascal. He walked alone, diploma tucked beneath one arm, tassel still dangling from his cap, robe fluttering lightly in the wind. His steps were slow, careful, like a man approaching something holy. A part of him wanted to run to her, to collapse in her arms and let everything fall out of him, the years of pride, the pressure, the fear, the longing. But something in her presence told him this moment required more. He stopped just in front of her. For a second, neither spoke. The noise of the parking lot continued around them, car doors slamming, kids squealing, parents shouting names. But somehow, in that little corner, it all sounded muffled, distant, like echoes in a dream. Then Pascal took one step forward and wrapped his arms around his mother. It wasn't a casual hug. It wasn't polite. It wasn't for show. It was the kind of hug that said, "I see you now, all of you." Elizabeth didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just folded him into her arms, her hands settling on his back, her fingers clutching the fabric of his robe like a lifeline. They stood like that for a long time. Neither one said a word at first, because some things don't need language. Some things are spoken through breath shared in the quiet space between heartbeats. Pascal pressed his forehead into her shoulder. For the first time all day, the cool front of composure cracked. His voice broke when he whispered, "You didn't just show up, Mom."
She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. They were full, glassy, unwavering. "You showed me what it means to stand still when everyone wants to move you." Elizabeth's lips parted slightly, but the words didn't come right away. She just looked at him, truly looked at him like a soldier checking a fellow soldier after a long mission, not to find flaws, but to acknowledge the growth, the strength, the survival. She reached up and cupped the back of his head, stroking his tightly coiled hair with the ease of habit, like she had done when he was a toddler with skinned knees and space dreams. Then she spoke, and her voice was soft. Not weak, but measured. "Strength," she said, "isn't about volume." Her thumb brushed a tear from his cheek. "It's about knowing when to stay grounded." Pascal swallowed hard. She smiled, not wide, not flashy, just enough for him to see the corners of her eyes tighten. That was her way. And around them, something subtle began to shift. Parents who had once stared earlier, questioning her place in the front row, questioning the uniform, the ticket, the silence, were now watching with entirely different eyes, eyes that understood. Even students, rowdy minutes ago, glowing with youthful chaos, paused. A few removed their caps in quiet respect. No one approached, no one intruded. They didn't need to be told. They just knew. The woman who once seemed out of place had become the very definition of it, a symbol, a mother, a pillar who had refused to be moved. And behind her, the 10 seals watched with reverence in their stance. Not one of them spoke. Some looked down, a few folded their hands in front of them, but none turned away. They had seen many reunions before, soldiers returning home, families meeting after loss, wounds stitched, goodbyes spoken. But this wasn't reunion by circumstance. This was reunion by earned peace. Mission complete. Pascal stepped back just enough to study her face one more time. There was a maturity in his eyes now, one that hadn't been there yesterday. Something had shifted in him too, like he had finally understood the real price of becoming a man. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Elizabeth saw it in the way he stood, taller now, but not because of pride, because of roots. She had given him those. And now he was ready to stand tall on his own. Another gust of wind moved through the branches overhead. She touched his face once more. "You did good," she said quietly. Pascal smiled. Just a flicker, but it was enough. They turned then, not back toward the crowd, not toward the stage or the banners or the cameras, but simply toward each other and toward the knowledge that something profound had just taken place. Not in a speech, not on the stage, but under an old oak tree where a boy became a man and a mother, once judged, once questioned, became something even stronger, unshakable.
The celebration had ended, but the meaning of it was only beginning to settle. Outside, the street lights buzzed quietly. The last streaks of orange from the Louisiana sunset faded behind a stretch of moss-draped trees. The world had returned to stillness. But inside the Stones' home, something sacred stirred. The living room was modest. Bookshelves packed with medical journals and dog-eared photo albums, a couch that had seen better years, a coffee table with old Marine Corps coasters. The lamp in the corner lit the room in amber warmth, casting long shadows across the floor. Everything about the space whispered of memory. Elizabeth Stone sat upright on the couch, her navy blue uniform replaced with a simple cardigan and slacks. Her short hair was still damp from the quick shower she'd taken after the ceremony, but she looked as composed as she had that morning, calm, but with something deeper in her eyes now, something reflective. Across from her, Pascal sat on the floor with his legs folded beneath him, his black graduation robe bunched behind him like a cape. The diploma rested in a manila envelope on the coffee table. His cap, now removed, lay beside it. He leaned over a thick photo album resting between them, its leather binding worn, the pages yellowed and softened by years of revisiting. He turned another page slowly. Each photo was a window into a world he had never fully understood until today. There were black and white images of tents in the desert, medical supplies stacked on crates, C-text lines side by side beneath camo netting. And there, faint and blurred, his mother hunched over a wounded Marine, flashlight clamped between her teeth, surgical gloves smeared with blood.
In another, she stood near a Black Hawk with a patient on a stretcher, the sandstorm behind her nearly swallowing the entire background. Pascal traced the edge of the photo gently with his finger. "You never showed me these before," he said softly. Elizabeth didn't look down. Her gaze remained steady on her son. "You were too young to understand." He nodded, flipping another page. There she was again, bare hands wrapped around gauze, sweat pouring down her brow as she clutched a man's chest in what looked like the middle of CPR. Her eyes in the photo weren't fearful. They were focused, steady, alive with resolve. Pascal inhaled deeply, his voice quieter now. "I didn't always know what you were doing." Elizabeth looked at him now. "I know, but I knew it mattered." There was silence after that, deep and full, not empty. It was the silence that follows truth when it finally finds a place to land. Elizabeth reached forward and slowly closed the album, her fingers lingering on the cover like it held something sacred, and in many ways it did. "The world may forget names and medals," she said. Her voice wasn't bitter, it wasn't weary, it was clean, like a blade sharpened by time. But people remember who stood by them in blood, in fire, in pain.
Pascal looked up at her, and in that moment he saw her not as a mother who packed his lunches, not as the woman who worked double shifts at the VA hospital or stayed up correcting his homework. He saw her as a warrior, a field medic who performed CPR on the floor of a collapsing outpost, a SEAL who stood when her commanding officers fell, a nurse who ran back into flames to stop a soldier from bleeding out because she knew every second counted. And suddenly the stage earlier that day, the cheers, the cameras, the diplomas, none of it compared to this living room, to this album, to this moment. Pascal leaned back against the edge of the couch and exhaled. "I don't know how you did it all," he said. Elizabeth gave a faint smile. "Most days I didn't either." Pascal chuckled softly, but then the smile faded into something heavier. "I used to wonder," he said, "why you were gone so much, why you missed birthdays, school plays, parent conferences. I didn't say anything then, but I didn't understand." She met his gaze directly. "You had every right not to." He shook his head. "Nah, I get it now." He stood and walked to the bookshelf. On the top shelf sat a row of medals tucked into frames, each labeled Service, Valor, Life-Saving, Distinguished Action. They had always been there, collecting dust. He picked one up and turned to her. "You never talked about any of this because it wasn't for me," she said. "It was for them." Them didn't need a name. It meant the ones she saved, the ones she held until help arrived, the ones who couldn't make it, the ones who did. Pascal set the medal down. Then he looked at her differently, not just with admiration, but with something closer to reverence. "Mom," he said, "I didn't just graduate today." Elizabeth's eyes didn't blink. She waited. He continued, "I inherited something." She nodded once. No tears, just pride, the quiet kind that doesn't need to be shouted to be felt. "Now carry it well," she said. Pascal stepped forward and knelt again beside her, resting his head against her shoulder for just a moment. She ran a hand through his curls like she did when he was small, but this time he wasn't a boy. He was a man stepping into something bigger than himself. Outside, the cicadas had begun their nightly chorus. A warm breeze drifted through the open window, but inside, time stood still. Elizabeth looked down at the closed album. It didn't feel like the end of a chapter. It felt like a passing of the torch, not just from mother to son, but from one generation of service to another. Not in combat, not in medicine, but in character. Because what she had taught him most wasn't how to fight, it was how to stand. How to stand for what's right when no one claps. How to hold your place when the world asks you to step aside. How to lead, not with your voice, but with your presence. That was the legacy. And as Pascal rose and walked toward the front door, preparing to meet his friends for a celebratory dinner, he paused once more at the threshold. He looked back. She was still seated, one hand resting on the album, the other on her lap. The golden lamplight outlined her figure like a painting.
He didn't say anything more. He just smiled and nodded. Then he walked out, carrying far more than a diploma. He carried a story, a name, a truth, a legacy. And Elizabeth, alone now in the quiet, let the moment wash over her, not in pride, but in peace. Mission complete.
The first light of dawn peeled across the horizon like a whisper. The Louisiana countryside lay quiet beneath a low mist, soft golden fingers of sunlight filtering through the tree branches overhead. The birds had just begun their morning calls, low, tentative, testing the air as if nature itself knew something sacred was about to unfold. On a quiet stretch of land framed by ancient oaks and weather-worn fencing stood a modest one-story home with chipped shutters and a screened porch, the kind of house that held more stories than square feet, the kind of house where strength had been poured into the floorboards with every footstep, every long night, every silent return from battle. Elizabeth Stone stood on that porch, coffee mug in hand, her posture as straight as ever. Her cardigan hung loose over a plain gray t-shirt. Her hair, still damp from a morning rinse, clung to her forehead in soft waves. There were no medals on her chest, no uniform, just a woman bathed in morning light, savoring the silence of a world that had finally stopped asking her to explain herself. Steam rose from her cup. She took a slow sip, then exhaled, long, steady, like she was allowing herself at last to breathe.
And then she heard it. Tires on gravel. No engine growl. Just a slow, deliberate crunch of rubber rolling across the driveway. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back or forward. She simply turned her head slightly, eyes trained on the road, waiting. A black SUV emerged through the trees. Tinted windows, no markings, clean but unassuming. It came to a smooth stop 10 feet from her porch, engine cutting off with a soft mechanical click. The door opened, then another, until all 10 men had stepped out. They wore no uniform today, no camo, no rake, no medals, just jeans, slacks, button-downs. One wore a faded baseball cap, another had on cowboy boots caked in mud. They looked like they had come from different corners of the country, but they all carried the same weight in their eyes, the weight of memory, the weight of gratitude. They said nothing. Elizabeth didn't move, but something in the air shifted. They walked slowly, side by side, until they stood at the foot of her porch in a tight horizontal line, 10 men wide, 10 lives, 10 stories, rewritten because of the woman now standing barefoot on her wooden planks, coffee in hand, robe fluttering slightly in the morning wind. Still, no one spoke, and then, as if guided by instinct alone, they saluted all at once. 10 right arms rose in perfect unison, palms flat, fingers tight, elbows crisp, the angles sharp. It wasn't showy, it wasn't for effect. It was a salute of weight, of brotherhood, of unspoken debt. Elizabeth blinked once, then quietly she bent at the knees, set her mug down beside her on the railing, and straightened. Her own right arm lifted, not quickly, not like she used to in the field, but with a slowness that honored the moment. Her fingers pressed together, her hand sliced through the air with precision born not of ritual, but of meaning. She returned the salute, not just as a former SEAL, not just as their medic, but as the one who stood for them when no one else could. She held it. So did they, and for several long, sacred seconds, the porch, the driveway, the air itself held still, as if the universe paused to acknowledge what this moment truly was.
Then slowly her hand lowered. Theirs did too. No one moved right away. Then one man stepped forward, middle-aged, tall, shoulders broad from decades of service, but eyes soft now, ringed with wrinkles earned in foxholes and firestorms. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded note, held it out with both hands. Elizabeth stepped down one stair to meet him. Their eyes met for just a heartbeat. "From all of us," he said, voice low. He didn't say his name. He didn't have to. She took the note. No handshake, no hug,
just a shared silence that said everything words could not. The man stepped back, rejoined the line. One by one, the men turned, walking back to the SUV without a word. Not rushed, not rehearsed, just real. Doors opened, closed, the engine hummed to life, and then they were gone. No tire spin, no horn, just the same slow roll of gravel giving way beneath the weight of a moment past. Elizabeth stood alone again. She looked down at the note in her hands. The paper was creased and plain. She unfolded it slowly. Inside, a single sentence written in firm, purposeful pen. "You didn't save our lives. You shaped them." She read it once, then again, and this time she let herself feel it. A tear welled in the corner of her eye, not from sadness, but from something far deeper, a mix of memory, pride, humility, and release. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't need to. The wind moved gently through the trees above, the leaves dancing in golden light. She turned back toward her mug on the railing, picked it up, took a final sip, and stood still, still and strong as she had always done. The world around her continued. Birds flew overhead, the breeze rolled through the grass. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. Life carried on, indifferent to legacy. But in that small clearing on that old wooden porch, legacy pulsed like thunder beneath quiet earth, not carved into monuments, not etched into medals, but remembered by the men who knew. Real strength doesn't shout, it stands, and so did she. If this story moved you, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to Military Stories for more powerful stories like this. What did you think about Elizabeth Stone's journey? About the way Pascal stood tall, not just as a graduate, but as the son of a quiet warrior? And what did that final silent salute from the 10 men mean to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to know how the story made you feel and how you interpret its ending. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? And tell us where you're watching from, city, state, or country. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Until next time, remember, real strength doesn't shout, it stands.